Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and other Florida officials are being sued over alleged voter intimidation and confusion regarding the voting rights of folks formerly incarcerated. Some have said felons voting rights. So the language there. 74-page civil lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court in Miami says the lack of a reliable database to determine voter eligibility for individuals with convictions is unconstitutional. Desmond Meade, who leads the group, they're behind the lawsuit. He joins us right now. And Desmond, this is the thing, what we saw. Ron DeSantis had folks arrested who were formerly incarcerated, who were told they could vote. And every single one of those cases got thrown out when the judge said they were told they can vote. What the hell is this here? But that wasn't his intent. He wanted to send it was making a chilling effect to cause people to say, hey man, you know what? Listen, I don't even want to chance it, because they were arrested, they were inconvenienced, they had to go to jail. It was all kind of drama they had to go through, and that's really what their goal was.
Yes, well, first of all, Rob, listen, thank you so much for Roland for having me on the show tonight. But let me tell you, yes, it's just a complete mess here in Florida. But I want to be very clear. At the core of our lawsuit is a very fundamental question that I believe have not only implications in Florida, but also national implications, right? And that question is simple. Whose responsibility is it to determine voter eligibility? Like, we've seen cases in other states where people relied on the state, where the state issued voter identification cards, but yet they were subsequently arrested and in one case convicted of voting illegally when they should not have been convicted as such. And so we've seen that exact same thing play out in Florida, where everyone who got arrested, everyone that the police stormed their homes and was pulling people out in the middle of the night and arresting elderly people, right? Every last one of those individuals had the same thing in common. They were all issued a voter identification card. And if a person cannot rely on the state to determine whether or not they're eligible to vote, then who the heck can they rely on? And that is what sits at the crux of our lawsuit. And we want the state to admit that they have known about a failed election system since Bush v. Gore, when hundreds of people were removed from the voting rolls in an election that was decided by a little over 500 votes. And so we want the court to force the state to, first of all, admit responsibility for determining voter eligibility, but to invest the necessary resources to create a system that is accurate, that people can rely on, and that they could feel confident to be able to go and vote without the fear of arrest.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the other thing is this here. You got to have the clarity. This is early on, because what they do is they always want to wait late. It's just too late, too late. No, folks need to know now. They need to know this summer if they can actually, register to vote. And what they did is, we saw what happened when Amendment 4 was passed, overwhelmingly in the state. The Republicans went back in and played around with it. Then said, oh no, you got to pay all your fines. And so they came back, and their conservative Supreme Court backed them up on it. And so that threw another monkey wrench in it. And that's what the fear is. They'll try to do the same thing come this year to, again, keep those 1.4 million people from being eligible to vote.
Well, Roland, there's two things. The main thing I want to make clear is that this thing is really not that difficult. It's really not that complex. And the reason why I say that, because right now in Florida, if I were to get traffic tickets in multiple counties in Florida and don't pay those traffic tickets, right, and my license gets suspended, if I go to any county in the state of Florida to say I want to get a driver's license or reinstate my driver's license, I don't care what county I go to, they will immediately be able to say, nope, you cannot get a driver's license because you owe money in these 4 or 5 different counties. This is how much you actually owe, right? And until you pay that, you won't get it back. But the minute I pay it, guess what? I get a clearance, and I'm able to get my license reinstated immediately. And so there is already a system in place, right, that can tell people what they owe if they have outstanding traffic tickets, Why can't there be a system in place for something even more what I think is more important than driving, and that's being able to vote, being able to cast a ballot?
So are you still hearing from people who were formerly incarcerated who are like, man, I don't know what to do? I told the story of the brother in Texas who voted in 2020, stood in line 6 hours, story was done, Republicans came after him, and this brother, he was eventually cleared, but he literally said to the Houston Chronicle, I'm not voting because I don't want to go through this again. That right there is what the fear is.
That is the chilling impact that resulted because of the result of those arrests. But how we're stepping up, listen, I say that when people push at us, we push back even harder. So we stood up a legal defense fund. We stood up a bail fund for where if people are getting arrested, we're bailing them out of jail. If they're getting arrested for voting illegally, we're getting pro bono attorneys from across the state of Florida who has agreed to represent these individuals. And what we've seen is that the majority of these cases end up becoming successful because we have strong advocates that's representing these individuals. In some cases, we've seen reports in the past where in other states, maybe that person didn't have a strong representation, or maybe the states sometimes try to scare you or use scare tactics to scare someone into accepting the plea deal. We see that happen. And so how we counteract that is by building a strong and formidable army of attorneys across the state of Florida that would stand up to the state and push back and say, heck no, right? This person did not do anything wrong. They relied on the state. They did not have the requisite intent to even be charged with this, right? Much less getting arrested. And so, therefore, our band of attorneys are stepping up to let people know that, listen, we got your back, right? If you honestly believe that you are eligible to register to vote, even the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals have said this, right? That when a person honestly believes that they can vote, they should not be treated like a common criminal. They should not be arrested and thrown in jail.
Questions from the panel. Derek, you're first.
Appreciate your work in this space. I continue to try to make the case that the John Lewis Voter Rights Act, if it was in place, it will mitigate and resolve these kind of issues. Do you agree or disagree with that? Well,
the only problem with that is that the states have a certain amount of rights as it relates to whether or not they can allow its citizens to vote. And that John Lewis Act would have probably only applied to federal election, right? Which, I mean, we have some win there as it relates to federal elections. But we've said over the years that the politics that impact us the most are local politics, right? Our governor, our state attorney, the judges that sit on these benches, the sheriffs that's running for office, right? Those are like very key races that we have to be involved in. And the John Lewis Act would probably not cover those races.
Julian?
First of all, thank you for your work and congratulations on your prior victories, especially with the legislation that was passed to allow formerly incarcerated people to vote, even though Florida played with it. I'm interested in what you have an army of attorneys who are, I assume, pro bono representing these people who have been charged with voting illegally. My question is, what's the cost of that, even though they're pro bono? What kind of resource use is that? Because of, with this malicious attack on these voters, it's costing money, resources, effort. Tell me about how much, and not just dollar terms, but in terms of diverted resources that could be used for other very important voting rights issues.
Yeah, so, and you make a valid point, and that's why there is that deep level of appreciation for these attorneys that are volunteering their time to represent individuals. We also have volunteer attorneys that are also representing people in court to get those fines and fees actually waived so they can, or converted to community service hours, and that at the end they could have that judicial order that basically say that they're free and clear and they could vote without fear of getting arrested. And so we have attorneys that are representing people who have been charged, and we also have attorneys that are representing people who wants to get clarification on their voter eligibility. And if they have fines and fees, we're going into the courts and getting those fines and fees waived. But when it comes to the cost, I could only speculate that it's in the probably millions of dollars when it's all said and done. When you account for attorney's time that he spends on a case, the time that our researchers spend researching the case and doing the state's job for it, there's millions of dollars that could have been allocated or reallocated and used in other places. So once again, we are grateful for the attorneys, and every day we're getting more attorneys that are volunteering to take maybe 1, 2, or even 3 cases on our behalf. And we're grateful for that, and we just have to keep pushing. But the cost of the burden, and I want to be very clear with this, and we're saying this in our lawsuit, should not be on a nonprofit. It should not be on us. The burden of determining voter eligibility should rest and reside with the state. Right, and especially when you have a state like Florida that like to preach about election integrity. Well, election integrity starts with the state doing its doggone job.
Omekongo.
Thank you so much, Desmond, for your incredible work over the years. It's really powerful, and it's impacted so many lives. I want to know if you could speak to whether there is a racial or political dynamic in terms of who's being targeted, because from a distance, we see it's Black folks and people who are more likely to vote Democrat. I've heard about stories about people in retirement communities like the Villages, that's primarily Republican, people who have actually voted twice intentionally and didn't receive any types of reprimand or little reprimand. Could you speak to some of that disparity in terms of who's actually being targeted?
So, so I don't know if part of this is good news or bad news, right? But, I think one of the best things that happened was actually the first 2 people that went to trial for that were arrested by this election integrity unit were actually people who were registered Republicans who voted for Donald Trump. And I thought that was great, right? Because I knew they wasn't coming for them. Or maybe it was. I don't know. Because at the time, the governor was a candidate for the Republican nomination for president, right? But what we've seen with the arrest of these 2 individuals that were registered Republican was an amazing opportunity to talk about voting in a way that went beyond just race. But when you step back and just look at the counties that were targeted, you would see more progressive leaning counties. You would see more counties that had a heavy African American Latino population that was being targeted as opposed to other counties, right? And then you've seen the cases that you was talking about that the courts threw out was the cases in which our lawyers challenged the jurisdiction of the statewide prosecutor to even bring those charges, right? And because what we were seeing was that the statewide office of prosecution was selecting the counties in which they wanted to usurp the power of the state attorney. Right? In counties in which they didn't want the state attorney to make a determination about whether or not to file charges, they exerted their so-called authority to do so. And it just so happened that it was the only counties they did that in were counties that had progressive DAs or DAs that were from the Democratic Party. They never took over, they never usurped the power of a DA that was a registered Republican. They never did that. And so that was very telling. It was very disappointing. But like I said, the silver lining is that even when they were just coming and targeting specific counties, right, when they cast that net, it caught some of their own people. And now it allowed us to have a much broader conversation about how ridiculous this is, how in the hell the state could start arresting people because of mistakes that they made, not the mistakes that a person made.
Wow.
Any other questions from the panelists? All right. Well, Desmond, we appreciate it, man. Good luck in the lawsuit.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm surprised, Desmond. Well, first of all, you at the office, but I know at home you would have had your lights and
Oh, yeah,
all your other, just for everybody who's watching, you know, Desmond tries his best to keep up with technology and yours truly, and it just drives him crazy because he'd be like,
do a darn good job, Roland.
Desmond be like, yo, bro, I got something new. Then I go, that's nice. Here's something I got. He like, damn, I got to get that one too. So we're always, and his wife Sheena.
My son Xavier on the job, and I'm pretty sure Xavier he's gonna bring it for you. Get my son Xavier to get on the job for me.
And his wife Sheena's like, stop it. You can't compete with Roland. Stop buying stuff, Desmond.
Yeah, I'm gonna get you one of these days.
All right, we'll see. All right, my brother, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.